fun. Sorry to get you up this early. I didn't want to get up this early either, but we're here. So let's make the best of it. I am Dr. Anthony Bean, and I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and I work here in Texas in Fort Worth at the Telos Project, a nonprofit that I run up in, again, Fort Worth, with about 13 clinicians that we treat pretty much anything under the sun, psychological assessments, and all sorts of good stuff. We really focus in on the geek and autism Asperger's population heavily, testing and working with them across a whole bunch of different varieties. The fun stuff of what we also do is we write a lot of articles and do a lot of research. And I am the, can you quiet down please, I'm talking.
Calm down. You're not that important.
People here. And I'm the author of this book right here, working with video gamers from a clinical stance, from a non-addiction clinical stance. And this is the panel of Do You Really Control Yourself? Of Gamers Avatars. Now we did Gamers Avatars because we also wanted to focus in on not just video games on this one, but also some role-playing games. And we have a VR specialist up here too. Yeah, we're gonna get to you, don't worry. I'm making her nervous, she's never been to one of these. So can we give her a round of applause? These are our wonderful panelists, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves one by one, and these are their Twitter handles. They like to joke around, so by all means interact with us. You should have seen us last night. It was ridiculous. So with further ado, I will let Dr. Rachel Cowart start.
Hi, I am Dr. Rachel Cowart. I am a research psychologist. I have been studying games and gamers for over 10 years. My focus is on media effects, so how games can influence us as players, our behaviors, our thoughts, our social and emotional well-being. I have written several books. I have one here, A Parent's Guide to Video Games, which explores these things about media effects. And I am a brand new D&D player, so I'm excited. I bought my first set of dice, I'm really excited. So we can talk about that later.
I'm Dr. Ryan Kelly. I'm a dancer first and foremost, but I don't make a lot of money because I lack the physique, talent, skill, and confidence to do it well. And so I second as a psychologist, just as to make money. You got to survive, pays for my dancing. And with that, I'm also the co-founder of Geeks Like Us. It's a media company that finds ways to capitalize on the unapologetic enthusiasm that we all have as geeks and the passion that we find through our hyper-focusing on D&D, therapeutic dungeon, or game master as well. And I'm also the writer and illustrator of the first comic featuring an Aspie superhero.
Hello, I am Dr. Stephen Daniel, also a dancer by trade.
He's better than me. He's pretty good.
I am. I'm much better than him.
His specialty is belly dancing.
Dance off? Dance off right now?
I don't think ballet and belly work.
No dance off.
Afterwards. Okay.
We'll dance off.
I'm an assistant professor at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina, so sorry I brought the weather with us because cold and windy is kind of our turf, so sorry about that, everybody. I mainly specialize in communication within streaming communities. More specifically, if you are a streamer, this is a really strong emphasis that we want to communicate to all of you that we are looking into terms of toxicity and privacy issues within the community. So if you're a streamer, we would really like to talk to you because we are going to be conducting focus groups, not only online, but also at PAX East and PAX West. So please, after this is all said and done, come and talk to us. We are really interested, not only in terms of helping the community, in terms of Twitch, YouTube, etc., but also future streamers, so they can have a healthy work environment in their next generation, and y'all's help is going to be critical in that. So that's my main research line, but I also do quite a bit in terms of avatar interaction, and so this is kind of a panel right up my alley, so it's going to be a lot of fun, so thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Stone, and I am now being outed as the PAX virgin.
You do have a very aw shucks photo right there. Like you're so
Oh
flattered.
yeah, kind of coy.
Like that's
a little bit coy
that's
there.
what that photo says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
I'm
just
not sure how I
projecting.
feel about that. You just projected.
Are you tucking your hair behind your ear? Oh my God. I'm so excited.
I am a psychologist, and I work in Fruita, Colorado, which we've all determined is in the middle of nowhere. It's 20 minutes from the Utah border. And I have created with my husband an app and VR program that is for use with all ages in therapeutic sessions. And I spend a lot of time writing about and talking with professionals about how gamers are not all kinds of things, and it's not evil, and I really am trying to champion how important all of this is in so many people's lives and what it means. So that's why I assume I was invited to be here. So thank you.
How about your upcoming book?
Which he wrote a chapter in, so it's the plug. Integrating
She edited it,
technology.
it's technically hers.
I did edit it and I wrote a chapter in it. Did you just go edit it?
No, I say he said technically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a good quotation,
Yeah.
technically.
It's integrating technology into modern therapies, and we have covered all sorts of different facets of that, different modalities and platforms and games, and also psychology, speech therapy, child life. It's just amazing how many arenas all of this can be very useful in. So I'm thankful to be here.
And a lot of the writers for her book are all across the United States, so it kind of gives play to the idea that just because we're here, and obviously all of us are here from different states and countries in some cases.
All right, fine, I live in Canada.
Yeah.
She's Canadian, guys. Don't judge her. Okay, she's great.
Hey.
I love your syrup.
I
take first
don't.
credit.
Watch for Mounties.
In a nutshell, basically, we have tons of these of us out there, and all of us are super friendly, and we like to interact with people, and this is kind of what, not him, he's a dancer, and tiny dancer. And we want to make sure that we let everyone know that reach out to the people around you, because more than likely there are geek therapists, geek people in your community, and to really hone in on that idea and meet up with them, because it's a lot of fun. And with that, I give it to Dr. Mario over there.
My name is Adam Davis. I'm the one non-doctor, but I am a dancer.
I feel like I'm in an episode of Big Bang Theory. Doctor, not a doctor.
You concur? I
I
concur.
do play
Concur?
a mean Dr. Mario, though. Just to be
I've
clear.
seen him, he's good.
I'm one of the executive directors of Game to Grow, which is a nonprofit
Ow.
organization in Seattle, and we use Dungeons and Dragons in therapeutic social skills groups for teenagers. So I've been doing that for 8 or 9 years now, using Dungeons and Dragons specifically to help kids, a lot of whom have diagnoses of autism or some sort of social setback. So I use the game very intentionally to help them come out of their shell and make friends. I also wrote a curriculum for using video games and dialectical behavioral therapy training program, so we can talk a little bit about that too. It's not my official hat, but I have done a bit of dabbling in video games too.
What's your background in? I forget, is it drama?
Yes. My background is in education. I've been a classroom teacher and worked in drama for many, many years, so I'm technically a drama therapist.
It's good to know.
And I talk in lots of voices. It's part of my job.
Y'all have a pretty cool booth too.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a table down with Table Titans in the expo hall. We're not on the booklet itself because we were given the space from Table Titans, so if you want to find me after this, I'll be at the table right adjacent to Table Titans.
He also plays in a D&D campaign through Geek Psychos called Clinical Role, where you can see his acting skills, and it's awesome.
Well,
In all of his voices.
you can also see my acting skills.
They're bad. They're really
They're
bad.
so bad.
Again, Canadian, so
Adam makes me look
don't
good.
hold it against her. You can. It's okay.
So the way that we wanted to have this panel set up, well, the way I want to have it set up, they have no clue what's coming on any of these things. There's not any bad or anything like that, but I didn't share any of these slides, not that many. And so we're going to kind of free fall this a little bit. More on Ryan than anything.
I was just laughing. I'm looking at your picture. I don't know if you're going to help me or make a pass at me. I don't. But I feel like either way, I'm good. I'm good with it.
With those 14 hairs on your chest?
Yeah. I like chest hair. I'm not very manly.
There was a giant conversation you guys all missed earlier, and it was intense, to say the least. So with that, I am going to pose the question to them. What are avatars? And I'm going to let these guys go at it. Debate, go. Make it happen.
All right. Who's going first?
I'm going to make Steven because he's long-winded and I like it.
Well, here's the thing.
Here we go.
Here it goes.
I'm a little bit into the direction of how we interact as a player with our avatars, and this is probably one of my favorite areas of it. And there's actually a scale that comes along with it, which so operatively named PAX scale. So it's player avatar interaction, which is where the X comes from. And it's a really interesting thing. It's pretty brand new. It's exploratory. We don't have a lot of confirmatory analysis for it, so which just means we haven't replicated a lot of studies to see how reliable everything is just yet. But the big thing is they had 4 different outcomes with it, and I really like these that came out. First was that first and foremost, our avatar could be an object. So this is your speedrunning community, this is your achievement hunter community. This could be along the lines of, so I brought up my persona get up today. And the reason I bring this game up quite a lot is because there's a lot within your avatar interaction, and I like to bring this up because Joker in this case, or Akira or Ren or whoever you want to call this person, you can kind of establish yourself within this avatar and make decisions. Now, if I'm playing this main character as an object, every decision I'm going to make is going to optimize my run through. So the decisions I'm going to make are going to make Joker more statistically great in terms of combat, in terms of progressing the story along. I'm skipping through all the cutscenes and so forth. The other one is me. I'm going to play as myself. And we see this happen a lot with D&D as well, that I play based on my decisions as Stephen Daniel, not as Joker would, not as Sir Eric of the Vale, which is one of my D&D characters, an Aarakocra monk. And with that, I make a lot of those decisions based on how I would make decisions, which happens quite a lot in D&D, especially when I panic. It's player and character knowledge. So my character obviously would do this because he has infinite patience. I don't have infinite patience. So I panic, I make another move. And so when it gets into what is the avatar, that's that interaction and a little bit of the conflicting areas. The other is other, which means that the character and me are completely separate social agents. This is hard to do, to completely remove myself from this character and say, this is who this person is, or this creature is, and I'm gonna leave everything out of it that revolves around me, which was a really cool one. And then the last one is a symbiote, which basically just means it's a mixture of both. I think that's, I mean, this is part of the debate, I suppose. I think that's how most people play, is we bring a little bit of both into it. When we talk about, again, the Persona series, you have a couple options of dating some older people that a little high schooler may not or should not be doing, and at least in my opinion. Joker may find it pretty cool, but I'm sitting there like, nope, vetoed. It's not happening. Rolf's in disapproval as well, as he falls over. This is my dinosaur, Rolf, and he doesn't stand up very well. But anyway, that's kind of how I see avatars, and again, a lot of it has to do with the player interaction of it.
When James Cameron started creating...
No. Try again.
With a 3D camera. No, okay, all right. I frankly see just avatars as projections of ourselves. So, you know, when we look in a mirror, we see a few things, you know, on the surface of who we are. We see what we look like, we see what we wear. We maybe see the tie and we're reminded that we go into work and that we're a psychologist or whatever we might be. And we might be aware of a few things, a few, you know, on the surface level thoughts, on the surface level feelings. But we don't see in our reflection our deepest thoughts, desires, insecurities, thought patterns that we have that we're not always proactively aware of. You know, we don't have a lot of time or energy, frankly, to analyze every decision, thought, emotion we have throughout the day, and it goes by unnoticed, and we sort of have to ask the question, how well do we actually understand ourselves? And I think with avatars, you have to be proactive. Every decision you make sort of draws on that subconscious, the things that you want, the ways you want to feel. You know, even things to who you choose in Smash Brothers. I mean, like a character you choose to play, like noticing that, wow, I choose a lot of characters who tend to have power moves that do a lot of damage if you hit them, but do damage to themselves as well. And so it's either a quick success and win or guaranteed failure, you know, and it's interesting. And so with avatars, again, it's projection ourselves that helps us know who we are, which is a big part of why we use tabletop games and video games, because it helps people understand. It gives them a chance to understand more about themselves, to try on other roles. For a lot of Aspies, and I know Adam does this too, you know, where it's like, okay, so choose your top 3 strengths, and that'll be a part of your character. But also, you're gonna be someone who's really high in charisma, and who's very social, and very confident in social situations, and extroverted, and almost arrogant, right? It's kind of playing that role is something a little different. So, yeah, a projection of ourselves to help understand who we are.
Yeah, and I think that it's a projection of who we are, and it's also, I think, for me, a projection of who we want to be. So, and it can shift day by day. Sometimes, well, most times I'm Yoshi in Mario Kart, to be fair. Sometimes I'm not.
Is Yoshi Canadian?
He is, that's why I like him.
He does
I'm
love
pretty
syrup.
sure he does. He does.
Right.
He's your Mountie.
Well played.
But then when it comes to like D&D, like Stephen was saying about the symbiote, it's like a little bit of you and a little bit of somebody completely made up. It could be who you want to be, it could be who you feel like being in that day. It can meld day by day. Your character can start one way and twist and turn another way. So Avatar, not just us, but they're also an ideal self, I think.
How about you two over there?
Go ahead. Tell
It's
us
very
about
Seattle of me to
Bragnell,
wait that
Adam.
long.
Hey, wanna grab a cup of coffee sometime?
So in Dungeons and Dragons, this happens a lot. We use this concept a lot in any role-playing game when we're making characters or whether we're playing as our characters. It is impossible to make a choice for your character that is not a choice that you are making. So if you are playing a character, you're still choosing the things that that character does at every moment. So your character is you. This is a big part of the way that we use Dungeons and Dragons in our groups, is if you're making a character that is Batman, you're trying your best to be Batman, you still chose Batman for a reason over any other superhero that doesn't actually have powers and just uses gadgets. You're choosing that for a reason. So it's like a projective technique, like a Rorschach test. You have a blank canvas and you're projecting things onto it from your subconscious thoughts, feelings, and experiences that matter to you, and that's data. As a facilitator, I can watch somebody who is putting something into their character, and oftentimes they're trying to make a character that's very different, but it's totally them. And that gives us some data as a facilitator for how we want to interact with that player when they're choosing to make the character that is just like them. So we have a lot of players who make aspirational selves, like Rachel was saying, who they're maybe a little bit shy, but they want to play a character who's super confident, who's a leader, and who's good at everything. Then that aspirational self is clearly something that we as the game masters can help encourage. But a lot of players make what I call a looking glass self, which is just them in a fantasy world. So they just gone through the looking glass, now they're in D&D. They're maybe a wizard now, but that's just them. And then they bring a lot of their own thoughts, feelings, and experiences into that character. And some people make catharsis characters too. Like characters that just like to go around and feel powerful and do stuff. Like when you're playing Fallout or you're playing Skyrim and you pause it and you kill everybody, or you save it and you kill everybody. That's like a thing you do just to like feel good for a minute, and you go back and you load the game up again.
Does this come back to murder hobo route that
Yep.
you were talking about?
People like to feel powerful, and they use their games to feel powerful.
Are we gonna talk about war too?
Well, the war effort, yeah.
Yeah, war effort, okay. All right.
Well said, Adam. And you look so handsome doing it.
I didn't hear what you said, right?
Well said. It was well spoken. Give me your good ear. The audience, the whole act. You gotta be able to hear me.
Do you all even know what the Rorschach is? Yes? Okay. I just want to make sure because, you know, we talk all about these things that we're familiar with and not everybody might be. For anybody who isn't, it's the two-sided ink blot that they did this with and they said, what does it look like? And everybody says, it's a butterfly, and then someone does it and then we all go, oh.
Where'd you get that picture of my dad making fun of me?
I made it in art class, son.
One thing that I want to add to everything that's already been said, so I don't want to just repeat things, is I think it's also an important thing with avatars is I like to pay attention to whether or not people are looking at the end goal, if they're looking at the in-game goals, if they're team-oriented. Are they picking an avatar that is really about how I'm going to succeed in some way, or is it about the interaction you're going to have with others? What role you take on a team? I think all of that is really, really valuable information, and usually is a pretty good parallel to what they see their place in life and their positions and their worldview of what goes on and how people treat each other, and then you can add in the pieces, of course, of what you wish could happen or how you are, but it's all very interesting and valuable information. And Leo, right? Leo and I were having a conversation about it this morning where he was thinking, well, what about if you just randomly are putting your character together in a certain way? And I said, well, most of us would probably argue that wasn't random. And I think you had a little mind-blowing experience there of thinking about, wow, maybe it isn't random. So it's an interesting conversation to have for sure.
So one of the big things is what they kind of touched upon a lot was the idea of projection. And in psychoanalytic theory, whenever we meet someone new, we always have to project a part of ourselves onto them. Whenever we project that part onto them, it's kind of a way of our psychic knowledge, kind of seeing, are we going to be friends with them, are we not, or is this dangerous, is this friendly? We don't quite know what's kind of going on with that. But the key point is, after that person that we've projected upon goes away, we have to reclaim that projection. And this is the way that I work specifically with gamers, is, I'll use Link because he's my favorite right now, is that when we play as Link, we have to project upon him. And as he's fighting all of those baddies and everything along the lines of going through the storyline, when we shut the game off, we have to reclaim part of ourselves from that journey and make ourselves feel a little bit more powerful. And that's kind of what everyone is talking about on this panel right now, is the fact that even though we project upon these avatars and we create them, we still have to take them back at some point. And that's where that psychological growth comes from, is from that reclaim. All right, why are these avatars that people make so important?
We should start on that end so you do this.
So this is like really everything that I do. Everything that I do with Dungeons and Dragons is focused on this question. Why did somebody choose that character, and what is the journey that they need to go on? So we put so much into our characters, and I encourage you, if you've ever gotten into a role-playing game, if you've been playing for a long time, think about the characters you've made. Over the course of your character history, I almost guarantee you, if you look at the characters you've played, and you think about what was going on in your life, I'll bet you could figure out why you played those characters. So for example, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons in middle school. I was kind of a bullied kid at school. Middle school was just the Wild West. It was awful. And I played a lot of characters who were confident, who were very charismatic, because I was an outcast. And so I played characters who had qualities that I wish that I had. And by playing those characters, I got a chance to feel what it felt like to be liked and appreciated. And I was also bullied for my size a lot as a kid, and so I played characters who were very dexterous, who could always just run away at the drop of a hat. They could disappear, so I never had to feel like I was being noticed all the time. I could choose. And that was something that I got out of that experience. And I had no idea at the time that that's what I was doing, but now that I've started seeing a lot of players do this, make these sort of aspirational selves, I can then see and analyze what is going on for them in their lives. So a lot of players, like I said earlier, who are very socially isolated will play very overtly charismatic characters. They don't have the skill set to back it up, but they are setting up the desire they have to work on this. I had a player who was very, 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 very shy, barely spoke above a whisper, and oftentimes would put his hands over his mouth because he was really just, you couldn't hear anything he said. It was really hard to interact with him. But he chose a dwarf barbarian character. And you could just tell right away that that was something that he wanted to play with. He wanted to experiment with what it felt like to take up space. And so my job as the facilitator was to help him feel rewarded and successful by being the dwarf barbarian. So anytime he was outlandish, even if he described what he did, using his whisper voice like this, like, I'm gonna go over there and I'm gonna scream and I'm gonna hit him with my maul. I would say, yes, you do. And you'd so confidently, brazenly bash in there, and you bash the guy over the head, and he cowers, looks at how strong and powerful you are. And I could see this little guy just kind of open up and smile, and for the first time he could see himself as someone it was okay to take up space. And that is why that character was so important to him, is we oftentimes think about who we want to be in our characters, and oftentimes get a chance to understand who we are better when we understand why we choose the characters we choose.
But another important point that I think you just touched upon is that as the dungeon master, you actually are helping to facilitate that. It's not just allowing him to play the character and stay in his closed up self. You are actually pushing him, and he doesn't realize that he's being pushed in that place. So you're keeping him going.
And as a drama therapist, I do a lot of embodiment, so I would say, how does your character say that? Or how does your character sit? Because I do things like, not everything is combat and dungeon crawling, so I had them infiltrate a fancy dinner party. They had to get some inside information on a corrupt magistrate or something, but the only place to do that was a dinner party. So they went to the gala, and I had them sit at the table at the dinner party the way that their characters would sit at the dinner party, and the dwarf character doesn't sit like this. So I had him sit at the table like this, and he took up lots of space, and then we just mimed having dinner. Like, that was a big part of our day that day, and I was, of course, every other NPC as the game master, so I come by, like, as the person with the bread who brings the bread around, and then he was like, I'm gonna grab the bread, and this is later on in our process, I'm gonna grab the bread and rip it in half, and then I'm gonna throw it at somebody. And I was like, I'm playing all the NPCs who are like, oh, you don't like the bread? Okay. He picks up the bread and like brings it over to somebody else. Would you like the squid ink pasta? And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna drink it. Awesome. And that was like the whole day. It was just miming eating food. Drama therapy.
How about you, Jessica?
I got so interested in that, I forgot what the question was.
Yeah, I'd like to yield my time to
That was
Adam.
really awesome. I
If
love
people
that.
could just assume that I said that. And so if Twitter and Instagram, just quote Dr. Kelly with anything he said. I appreciate it. I yield my time.
This is not the Senate floor. Why are these avatars important? What have you kind of discovered through your own work with VR versus being a clinical therapist? Why are these so important that people play as them?
Well, in VR, I'm assuming all of you have done it. It's just absolutely phenomenal, all the sensory experience that you have in that, and to be able. So, I don't know how to quickly explain the program that my husband and I have created, but let's see how you do it really quickly. So, is anybody familiar with sand tray therapy?
Raise your hand if you are.
4, 5, 6, 8.
Okay.
Okay. So, yeah, so the real short version is it's a projective technique, and you have a box, a wooden box that has sand in it, and usually it's painted blue on the bottom, and then you have typically shelves of little miniatures, little houses, little people, trees, animals, all that kind of stuff. And you would take the miniatures and make a world in the sand, okay? So then the facilitator's job would be to look at what that worldview was, what's going on with that person, put the information that you're gleaning from the scene together with what you know about the client, and move forward. So the program that my husband and I have created basically takes that and puts it on an iPad or in VR. So when you enter into the VR world, you are basically either up above looking down sort of in a godlike way, or you're down on the sand tray, and then you can be creating, painting, making things bigger, smaller, putting trees and dragons, whatever you want to put in there. So the importance in here goes along with what everybody is saying, is that in VR, you asked me specifically about, in VR, you're now walking around interacting directly with all of these things in this world that you created, and working through whatever it is that you're in there for. So, and with your entire body, and what you were talking about of coming out of character is really profound when people come out of the VR as whatever character they were in the scene, and then having to readjust back into it, and then that would be the facilitator or therapist's job to help them transition.
Very well said. Stephen?
I don't have any clinical areas on this just because I'm not a clinician. I'm a communication professor. But again, my emphasis is within avatar interaction. So one of the areas that I like to look at the most is a concept called looking glass self. And that's noticing your actions through some of your interactions and how people respond towards those. And so you have a reflection of yourself and how you do things in a particular manner. I've only noticed this anecdotally, but I think it would be a really cool study to look into, is I've had students come up to me who play D&D a time or two and have mentioned that they're a little bit of their selves, not necessarily in character, treated somebody within their campaign in D&D or even in a video game in a really odd way. And he was like, I was really aggressive there. Why was I aggressive there? Or I thought I handled that really well. What did I do? It was like a shock to them, and they were really happy about it. It's like, oh my gosh, that was great, what did I do? And that's the kind of thing where you are doing a little self-introspective area. You're also, this is what's called intrapersonal communication, so communication within your own mind. It's cognitive dissonance and so forth, of two negating opinions going back and forth, of not feeling at balance for whatever it is that you said. But this is the kind of thing that would be really cool for reflection from a communication standpoint, not only in terms of what they're realizing, but also in what they can do about it. So when they break that character or they make a decision based on that character and say, I did something really cool there, can I apply it? And to what you were saying, Adam, in terms of somebody who's really introverted, reserved, and playing that character, maybe that's a projection and maybe this is something you dealt with and hopefully is the goal. Through that looking glass self, that particular individual maybe can feel a little bit more confident in certain scenarios. Again, I would imagine that's the goal there. Yeah, and I mean, that's awesome. And I think, now granted, I may be just making your point more, but I think that's a good outcome in terms of the interaction perspective of it through communication.
We've been slowly trying to get him into psychology, but he refuses to get another doctorate. So we've done some good progress. He's actually using a lot of psychological theory more than communication lately.
Honestly, they've covered it so well. What I would say would just be redundant. So, but I will pose this, and actually I would love it if you could give me your answer. Anybody who used Twitter, I just sent out a question. But I want you to think about this. If Kirby sucked you up, what power and look would he gain? And I am going to put a little, for this group at least, I'm going to put a little asterisk on that. It's got to be based on a strength, because I had a client once where I asked that, and I was like, what power would he get? And he was like, depression. All right, just a mopey Kirby who doesn't want to fight. No, we're not. But anyway.
Ryan has asked me this question before, and my answer was, I would know what wine goes well with what cookies, and I think that's a good power.
You would die so fast.
I didn't say it was practical. Going back to Dr. Bean's question, building from what Adam said so eloquently, it's not just about it's not just about, okay, if I'm really shy and I want to make a charismatic character, it's also providing the opportunity to do so in a way in which they feel incredibly safe in doing it. And it doesn't even have to be as dramatic as acting it out, because if you watch Clinical Role, I don't act, but on things like avatar-based play, like in MMOs, you get the opportunity to travel around and explore on your own and see how that goes, see how you can fight the monsters by yourself and hold your own, see how you can lead a 5-man group. And you're able to do it, and you're able to fail in a way in which it's not embarrassing, it's safe, and you can then just run back from the save point and try it again. So I think that avatars provide a vehicle that we have had before in Dungeons & Dragons, but in the ones that are also mediated by the screens, by the 3D avatars, allow us to do it in a way that's a bit more accessible for bad actors like me.
All right, so this next question, we've actually kind of answered it pretty well of how they've been using those things. And this one would be more primarily for the therapist, so there'll only be technically 4 of us, but I'm not really responding as heavily as I could. But if there's any, because I want to save time for questions for you guys. So out of the 3 therapists up here, is there anything that you feel like you did not touch upon, such as like projection, positive change, using in video games versus board games, imagination, stuff along those lines that you kind of want to impart before we open it up for questions?
I've spoken a lot to this already. Let somebody else jump in.
I think the only thing I might add is, I would say my favorite way to use this, and I think, and personally, and this is biased, but the best way to do it is tabletop games, but you can do it with anything. I mean, for any clinician, or for any client, the first thing you do is I gotta figure out who this is and what they like, and what their interests are, because if I'm not adhering to those, it's pointless, and we're not going anywhere. And even games like Fortnite, it can be something interesting to watch how they play, that they hide in houses or bushes and they wait for the end to try to capitalize on that, explosive spam to get the win, okay? Or people who, are just so confident and just rush into battle even when it doesn't seem very logical. And that there, even with something as simple as that, there is a discussion of why are you doing that? Because that does relate to who we are as people. So any video game, any tabletop game, all of it can be used as a form of projection.
Weirdly enough, that's how I play FIFA.
You just hide in a bush.
No, I'm not kidding. Well,
Do they have bushes?
because I'm terrible at it.
It's
No.
Rocket League 2, he just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, he modded in a bush.
It's interesting though, because I create this character, and it's got a backstory. The certain teams he goes to. There's for a specific reason. Right. So yeah, I love like story modes in sports games. It's really weird, but I like doing that, and I think a lot of people have when they have that free roaming chance to do something like that. There's a lot of people who do that too. So I can see what you're talking about with Fortnite. That's really cool.
Yeah. And by the way, this is a non sequitur, but did anybody play that old PlayStation game, The Summoner? That is such a random game. We got like one guy. Dang. You might have seen this clip. There was like this one hidden clip in this game where it's all the characters and the avatars, but it's as if they're in a real world playing D&D. And there's a scene where a guy's like, all right, so, Bane the Paladin comes in with blue eyes. I have gray eyes. I know I said blue eyes, but I have gray eyes. Oh, okay. But like even little things like that matter. I mean, it's, anyway.
I think it's so important to have either be a therapist or have a therapist who has the view that you were just talking about of who are you, what are you bringing in, whether that's gaming or it's anything else, anything. And honestly, that's an issue that I feel like I'm constantly fighting in my little sections of my field, because my opinion is it's important to know what you're bringing in and what's important to you and who you are and what makes you tick and all of those things. And so if you are a therapist or if you are seeking one out, please make sure you find someone who has that type of a viewpoint, because it's so important. Otherwise, there's going to be important parts of you that are not going to be addressed, valued, understood, all of that. And it doesn't mean that whoever you see or whoever you are has to have played everything, because I am not a gamer.
But she knows quite a bit.
Yeah.
I often ask my children, that's a good source for me, or watch YouTube if somebody brings in something that I don't understand. And I ask my clients and have them teach me about it, and then I understand even more. I'll tell you really quickly a very funny story. Well, it's funny to me, so I'm just showing you.
We'll be the judge.
So years and years ago when RuneScape first came out, my oldest, I have an almost 22-year-old and a 19-year-old, and then 2 littler ones. And they played RuneScape all the time, and I said, well, I need to enter their world and understand what they're doing in this. So I made a RuneScape account, and I kept getting lost in the wilderness and getting taken, everything killed and everything taken, and I sucked. Like, it's just, there's no doubt about it. So what I ended up doing so I could play with them is I found a village, and I sat in the village and I killed chickens. And I was the lady who everybody came to for their feathers, because nobody else wanted to sit around killing chickens to get the feathers. I was so rich Oh my gosh. Because I would negotiate these ridiculously high fees for my feathers. And my children to this day still talk about me being the chicken feather queen in RuneScape.
You have your own little hat.
I did. I should get one.
I think
Yeah,
you do.
maybe I'll find one. Yeah, that'll be good.
Can really make Colorado fun. And with that, I wanted to open it up to questions from you guys, because this is an important thing. It's not very often we actually get all of us together to kind of ask any sort of important questions of what we're doing and how we play as games avatar style and all that fun stuff. So the mic should be hot and you guys should be good to go. And if we run out of time, we will answer questions outside as well. Don't be shy. Just come up to the mic. Just don't kill each other, please.
No?
Ankylosaurus.
Oh, he's bringing you one.
Real hot mic.
Hot.
Oh, it's
Turn it on.
That's better.
Yeah.
This is a question to sort of a gender question. How much harder is it for, in a therapeutic sense, to use computer gaming as opposed to role playing for women, given that so many female characters in gaming tend to be very two-dimensional and makes it very difficult for women to express themselves. And I'm going to aim this question to the lady on the left.
Yeah.
What do you
Sarah.
feel about the
Sarah.
two-dimensionality of the characters in gaming?
Now, I'm going to warn you real
That
fast.
is like her exact topic of like, if she
It
was
actually is,
here,
if she
she
was
would be
here.
so on that book.
I'll warn you, she tends to talk in racial slurs. Bear with us, guys. It's going to get rough. That's a fantastic question, by the way.
That's a really good
I wonder-
question.
Oh my God, it feels
I
weird
mean,
answering it.
Sarah has the answer, so you know Sarah.
Do you want to
Do you
go?
want to take it, Jessica?
No.
No?
I don't know, I agree that female
Yeah.
characters in computer games, is what you want to talk about, is two-dimensional.
Yeah.
I do not do therapy, so I cannot answer the question about using computer games in therapy versus tabletop games.
I will say, I think you hit on a really good point, and I can speak more about comics on this one. So for a long time, the hip-waist ratio of a female superhero was so extreme they couldn't even bear children. It was about, the waist was about 60% of the hip, right? And of course the breast, the average size in anime is a double E, right? So I think that's pretty frustrating because obviously appearance is important. It's the first thing we see in a character. So in comics, they're starting to really change that. I mean, they're starting to have, a physical woman, Ms. Marvel. Of course they're gonna have like large lats, broad shoulder. They're gonna look like, very strong, right? So and then the hip to waist ratio on one of them was 8 to 10. So I think that's a start, but in video games, I don't think we're really doing it yet, but it needs to be addressed, for sure.
So one of the things is that what you're kind of talking about is a little bit more of that superficial look of them also. Is one of the things is what I do is when I work with people who are adopted, who have been orphaned or in foster care on some level, is I always focus in on them playing a game that is going to interact with that orphan archetype with them. And so it focuses on the narrative storyline and how do we immerse ourselves into that storyline and what lessons can we take from that? This person did this in the game. How can you take that and what does it mean for you to go accomplish that? So we're not focusing necessarily just on the pixels of that, but more of the storyline and the medium of the game itself too.
But
Just
if it
block
is-
everything with your blast plate. And you'll be fine. It blocks everything.
If it is talking about their appearance, though, it's also what do they accept and what do they reject?
Mm-hmm.
What comes up in that conversation can be really valuable.
Good question.
Hi, so I work in a research lab that makes educational video games, and so we kind of struggle with the opposite thing. Instead of trying to analyze what players do with avatars, we're trying to use the games to impart new information onto them. And I'm wondering if you have any advice or tips, because there's like a sweet spot where you want to create a space where players can inhabit, but not like leave out all of the information you want to put in there. Do you have any like advice on that?
We're talking about flow, getting into the state of flow.
Flow, but like creating a character that they can learn from but also be at the same time. and not like reject from it and find that cognitive dissonance?
One of the things I'll start off on this one is there are video games out there just specifically for depression, anxiety, and stuff like that. But one of the big things of what we actually see is that usually when psychologists make it, the immersion or the flow sucks. If game designs make it and try to talk about psychology, they miss it completely. There's no interaction upon it. And so a lot of those games are not as well-rounded or can be utilized as much as what they should be able to do, which is one of the reasons why I specifically just stick to the mainstream games or even the indie games, because those storylines have already been created. They're going to capture some gamers. So my advice is to, what about those games are capturing people, and try to use that in your thing, and then impart upon it the lessons you want it to be done, like through quests, through other aspects of the game, learning the controls, stuff like that.
I have 2 colleagues I'd like to send your direction, so come talk to me after the panel.
Thanks.
So part of today's discussion, a lot of it revolved around players in Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing tabletop games. I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about the Dungeon Masters themselves. I know in your practice, usually you guys are the Dungeon Masters, but for a lot of people, there's a big transition period between being a player in someone else's game and then deciding to take that step to be the leader of the game. And then, of course, in most friend groups, a lot of people have the one guy who's always the DM. So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to talk about that specifically.
There's a lot of skills to being a game master that are very, very valuable life skills. So we've done a little bit of that because the way that we help our kids, we are the game masters, and that's like really part of the contract we have with the players and their parents. So we don't have the players game master for each other, but we have done workshops where we've trained the young people to be game masters for each other. And then we're working on leadership skills, we're working on flexibility, we're working on being present in the moment. Because as a game master, you have to be prepared, but you also have to be prepared to go off the rails and follow somebody else's lead. So there's a lot of skill set that's very valuable to a game master that is parallel with very valuable life skills. So we talk about that a little bit with our kids also.
I will say, so for Game to Grow with Adam, they have a lot of really good resources, and as well, the other co-founder of Geeks Like Us, Dr. Megan Cannell, and Dr. B, they are creating a standardized training on how to do that, especially therapeutically. So if you want to talk, okay.
Just again, anecdotally, I have no clinical experience with this. I am petrified to be a DM, and I think that is a big transition. However, our designated DM in our group have had me do a dungeon build based on the backstory of my character. So. And she just sashayed everything to me when it came to, we like found ourselves randomly in this place. And she's like, you're kind of in control now. And I'm like, oh, no, that's not happening. And she's like, well, it is, and you're gonna do it. So that might be a really cool way of just intermittently bringing people in into smaller doses before they actually get into the real reins of DMing.
And being a game master, also, like we said earlier, there's a lot of making stuff up that goes into making and playing a character. As a game master, you make up most of the world, so there's a lot of projection in there too.
Yep.
War efforts, if you were at the panel.
That's actually the bit of advice that first got me to be Jim, because I was terrified by it as well. I'd always play, I don't have to be very thoughtful to play. And then that was where he was like, dude, you're the god. You don't have to, don't worry about the mechanics, don't worry, just do it, and just have fun with it, so. And also, Matt, do you know Matt Colville? Do you ever watch any of his videos? He provides a lot of he helped me learn how to be a DM pretty well, so you might check him out. Yeah.
So I had a little bit of trouble trying to figure out how to word this question. With the development of OpenAI, we're at the point where we've proven that we can build AI where we can have a conversation with it. And in esports this year, we actually beat Sweden beat Korea, but an AI also beat them.
Yeah.
An OpenAI, so that was fun to watch. And the development of the NeuroWeave coming up, as well as things such as the Mobius project, how do you think mentally and socially it'll affect us if we get to the point where we can integrate OpenAI into characters in video games?
Are you familiar with Dr. Skip Rizzo?
No.
You should be.
Shame.
RIZO. He's out of USC. He's doing absolutely amazing research and has been for years on using AI, specifically in VR, but in other ways too. So I think he's somebody you're going to find very, very interesting. I don't know how to answer you other than
It's a really good question. It's a long answer. But a good question.
Also, there's Dr. Jamie Banks. She's at West Virginia. She just got a big grant to study something in that similar vein about AI.
Okay, I got to share this one Kirby thing from Joseph Thomas. It'd be insanely handsome with the ability to panic about nothing for no reason. That's really funny.
Thank you.
So I was wondering, other than D&D, what types of games would you use, and how would you use a mainstream game where the person you're trying to help doesn't see themselves in that, like an LGBT person, when there's no characters like that?
Are you directing that towards specifically Adam? Okay. Go on, sorry.
So the question was, other than D&D,
What other games do you use and see the most of, and then how would you use a mainstream character or game when the person can't relate to that character?
gotcha. So so we played Dungeons and Dragons with a lot of modified rules. We've dabbled in other games. We do a lot of other tabletop games for like one-shot workshops and stuff. So we'll play like Flux to help you understand non-attachment. There's a lot of other games we play. But specifically to maintain the concept of the avatar as the through line here, characters, they can make their own character. So a part of our character creation process is, what is your character's pronouns? And then I will stick to that. I will stick to that the whole way. And so we will have a lot of players who are exploring gender issues or exploring sexuality issues, and we talk about representation a lot. So I will make sure to give them a list of requests. And oftentimes there's requests where like, I want to have some queens, not just kings, that we interact with. Like the benevolent quest giver doesn't always have to be an old white man, right? So we do that very, very intentionally in the game, because representation is important, and we want to make sure that the avatars that they're playing through the game can be whatever they want them to be.
You might also want to think, from video games specifically, the type of game you're playing. This is something we talked about in one of our morality panels that had to do with a blank slate character, a blended character, or in this case, the player character. So a lot of these will be like moral choices or how your avatar relates specifically on what the game's plot is all about. It might be canon that you're supposed to do this kind of thing. I have a hard time playing Shadow of Colossus, for instance, because those poor Colossi didn't do anything, and yet I am mercilessly killing them. I don't identify at all in that case, because I just feel so bad, and you're supposed to. That's how it's meant to play. But then you get your Bethesda games that are completely open. You can play however you want it to. I believe our cardboard friend here, Sarah, mentioned something along the lines of race selection and what you should anticipate with the race that you selected in that environment. And Bethesda does a pretty good job with it. Blended characters in those kind of games, again, Persona, I wrote these down now, Fable, Telltale games when they were still around, Silent Hill series can also be a part of it as well. So the type of game and that kind of selection might have a lot to do with it as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi folks. We kind of just talked about this actually, but I'm interested in kind of what value is perceived in the idea of introspection through a character that is not like you. Dr. Bean, you talked about projecting on Link as, who is kind of a blank slate character, not counting the Philips CDI games where he talks. But I'm interested in...
What was the thing, the princess? The princess one? What did he say in the show?
What is it? Excuse me.
Excuse me, princess.
The example that popped to mind for me is Grand Theft Auto 5, where you have 3 different playable characters, and 2 are very much extreme opposites of one another in Michael, who has sort of come to represent a desire for an orderly life with family and normalcy. And then you have Trevor, who's very much the embodiment of chaos and just complete, you know, player expression at the expense of the plot. And, you know, people are going to relate to one of those or the other, but it seems pretty unlikely that people are going to relate to both. And I'm interested in, I guess, you know, the idea if there is room for introspection and growth, saying, huh, that, I didn't think that character was like me, but I kind of see some facets of myself in them.
Great question.
So what I've seen in my clinical experience over the last decade now at this point has been that the first time someone will play a game, they're going to play it as themselves, so like how they would play through the game. So whether it's good, bad, or anything like that, they project their actual self onto their character. Second time they play, they go the complete opposite because they want to know what it's like to be that type of person. And usually, when they play that second time, they don't play the game all the way through because they can't handle it. They don't like to do that. It's not part of who their soul, their essence, in a sense. And they have a really hard time with that. And that's when that discussion comes up. What about that don't you like? And who in your life is similar to that? And how do we grow from this? How do we interact with this? You can tell your character on the game, I don't like playing as you. And that's really easy because it's a one-way conversation. But the twist is, how do you then have that conversation, the harder one, when it's a family member, when it's a good friend who's changed over the years, when it's a colleague. And that's where that introspection really kind of comes on in.
One thing I would say real quick is I think for any time where there is that discussion of like, why do I like that? Do I want to be that, right? You know, a lot of people live kind of aimlessly, just kind of doing what feels good, avoiding things that don't feel good. But I think when it comes down to it, if you're wondering that about this character, you sort of say, does this line up with my values, right? And if it does, maybe there's something to look into. If it doesn't, you know, maybe it's a feeling that's not quite valid. It's like, no, I don't want to hurt anybody. Yeah.
But it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, it's good to know.
It's good to know.
Sure, even invalid feelings are
Yeah.
noteworthy. Mm-hmm. Good question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
We're going to have time for one more question, then they're going to kick us out, but we will be out there. Yeah.
That question was similar to what I wanted to ask. So, but I think it's what I have in mind is different enough, and maybe it'll be helpful. So, an example that I've had in my gaming time that was similar to what you just talked about playing it a way that you don't want to play. I played through Dishonored in kind of a peaceful way. Well, it's never truly peaceful,
right.
but you know, like I didn't kill everybody. And then I tried to force myself to play in the way that I don't want to play and kill everybody in the second, and I did that exact thing. I stopped playing because it just felt gross. But you know, you guys talked about the value of experimenting in games and how that can be really valuable. Should we at times push through? Could we gain something from that and do, you know, because it's just a video game. I could have played through and killed everybody. That's not going to make me a murderer or something. But, you know, what are the limits of experimenting? Because I think also some of us struggle with, like, just accepting who we are. What are the kind of limits there?
I'll say one thing real quick because I had the same question a while ago. I think it's a great question. Okay, so you know when we look at people who are successful, a lot of them have something called Machiavellianism. Basically, one's capacity to use other people. Okay, and in general, that I think probably most of us that would sound inherently wrong. But the reality is, we do need to have that skill to some extent, right? So if you're playing a character that's using others, but your value is I should always, you know, be kind and I should always sacrifice myself, shirt off my back, even if it's 32 degrees and they already have a shirt type of situation. It can be nice to practice that a little bit and try to find your line. Where can I do that to a degree where it's still aligned with my values, where it's assertiveness and it's confidence and it's an act of valuing oneself, and where is it the point where it deviates from your value and you're like, nope, that's narcissistic. And I think to pushing past it and then even going beyond it, be like, nope, I'm past my, like you did, I'm past my limitation, I'm past the line where it's comfortable, and then find that line can be really important.
What he's talking about is the idea of narcissism. So there's two components. When we think of narcissism, we think of it as super, super bad. But everyone has it. That's called primary narcissism. That's what pushes us through everything. That's okay to have that. It's when secondary narcissism comes on in. And that's when we start seeing people using other people for malicious means, for not caring about their their well-being, and really having a use and abuse relationship with everyone. That's the secondary narcissism, and that one is the more potent and dangerous one.
I think the question is less whether or not you should, and more why you do or you don't, and what that means to you.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
He is signaling us.
Very politely, I might
Very,
add.
very polite. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
Thank you guys.